when you're testing antimicrobials, you're testing them and regulating them is important. You know, regulation is an important, essential requirement because it keeps people safe. The issue becomes when the regulations really start to define the testing regime, and the testing regime then really start to define the types of decontaminants that enter the market space. So if you have a set of rules which says, in order to enter this nightclub, you need to be wearing red shoes, yellow trousers, and big ears, yeah, and a red nose, then you're going to have a nightclub that's empty. And I'm afraid the disinfectants world is a bit like that. So because there's so many constraints about how you test about what is a disinfectant, what is a decontaminant, that's really restricted the innovation in that market space. So an example of this is in the testing that's taken, that's routinely used for testing disinfectants. They use European normal testing, EN tests. Now a suspension test requires you to have maybe 5 minutes or maybe even 15 minutes residence time. Now in ECAS, we've done work, you know, after 10 seconds, it's doing nothing. It's gone. So you can see there how the tests that are used to gatekeep, you know, new entrants into that market space for widespread use are not fit for purpose. And I think the best illustration of this is if we were to reassess bleach under the current system, yeah, with toxicity and EN tests and all this kind of stuff, it would be very difficult to get it approved as a biocide. So in many ways, legislation has a key role to play, but I think we also have a duty to be more innovative in that space and have a system by which we can triage and we can de-risk new innovations coming in. Because what we know at the moment during the pandemic is what we really need is safe, rapid, fast disinfectant. Now, most disinfectants will tell you they kill 99.9%, and that is a requirement of the test. And that sounds like a lot. If you have a trillion bacteria, 0.01% of a trillion is still quite a lot of bacteria, or still quite a lot of viral particles. The other thing they'll tell you is that they're effective, 99.9% effective, but they're only 99.9% effective after you've left something for 5 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on what test has been used. So how many people do you see, for example, in everyday life, leaving something for 5 minutes? When people come and clear your tables, they don't leave anything for 5 minutes. When people actually, you know, decontaminate, pretty much in my experience, they do not leave it for the required time that is needed, and that feeds directly into the tests that they've used to get biocide approval. So I think there's a real kind of honesty we have to have here. There's a real kind of look, we need to have a really deep look into how we organise ourselves as societies and how we encourage innovation. And really what we should be driven by is not so much tests. Tests are important, but we should be driven by scientific evidence. And if we look at ECAS, then there are thousands of papers, hundreds of papers that have been published that clearly show that ECAS have bactericidal and decontaminating properties. For me, the biocide directive in Europe is one sure way of making sure you don't get any innovation, because if it costs you €500,000 to get a disinfectant out on the market, then that's really difficult. And there's a reason why all of the disinfectants that we use in our day-to-day lives are dominated by big conglomerate companies. That's the real reason. You know, it's not the science. You know, if you want to know if it works, don't look at the legislation, look at the science. But there's a problem, because you can't really encourage widespread adoption unless it satisfies the regulation requirements. So there's a need for regulators, there's a need for scientists, there's a need for suppliers, technology suppliers, and end users to work together. And that's the new world that we're living in, where problems are solved through collaboration.